Coming to you live from Nairobi, Kenya. Welcome to Africa Focus, where we bring you news from across the continent right here on Switch TV Kenya. My name is Joel Chacha. Start interacting with us on our social media platforms at Switch TV Kenya, at Joel Chacha M on Twitter, and as well on Facebook, Switch TV Kenya and Joel Chacha. Send in an SMS via 22999 free of charge. But first, here are stories making headlines.
Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta extended the nationwide curfew and restricted alcohol sale in eateries. Tanzanian opposition heavyweight Tundu Lissu returns home from exile to challenge President John Magufuli in elections later this year. We begin with Africa Roundup stories.
Struggled to meet the expectations of the Tunisian people, and already fragile economy has been battered by the closure of the country's border due to the pandemic. Iran calls on its citizens to observe health protocols more closely to ease the burden of exhausted medical staff battling the novel coronavirus. The Islamic Republic announced its first COVID-19 cases on February, and the outbreak quickly became the Middle East's deadliest. Iran declared coronavirus deaths have surged since the end of June and claimed more than 200 lives nearly every day in the past week. Iran said earlier this month that 5,000 health workers had been infected with the novel coronavirus and 140 had lost their lives. Officials say 12 of Iran's 31 provinces were classified as red and 13 were on alert or close to red. Red is the highest category on the country's coronavirus risk scale. Authorities have made masks mandatory in enclosed public spaces and allowed hardest-hit provinces, including Tehran, to reimpose restrictions that had been progressively lifted since April to reopen Iran's sanctions-hit economy. Former President of the Central African Republic, Francois Bozize, on Saturday announced he would run in the December presidential election, a high-risk vote in one of the world's poorest countries plunged into civil war since he was overthrown in 2013. Bozize, who returned from exile in Uganda in mid-December, told supporters he solemnly accepted the task you have confided in him after he was chosen to be his party's candidate at a convention in Bangui. The former president took power following a 2003 coup before being overthrown himself 10 years later by Mikel Dojodita, head of mainly Muslim selector rebellion in the predominantly Christian country. Since then, the poor landlocked country has spiraled into bloodshed marked by vicious intercommunal violence.
Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta extended the national curfew from 9 p.m. to 4 a.m. for another 30 days, and there will be no sale of alcoholic beverages or drinks in eateries and restaurants over the same period. Restaurants will also close from 7 p.m. Kenyatta's move was after the nation saw cases triple in the past month.
Like many nations in East Africa, Kenya took a swift action to combat the coronavirus, closing its borders on 25th when it only had 25 cases, shutting down schools and imposing a curfew while advising people to work from home. The effect whatsoever has manifested itself to more than 280 COVID-19 related deaths so far after the first infection was announced in March.
The surge in infections has continued for the last 21 days. And in some areas, notably our capital city, this has accelerated sharply. And my and our meeting's greatest concern at this moment is the aggressive surge of infections among young Kenyans, who are in turn, unfortunately, affecting their elders. I do further order and direct as follows: that our nationwide curfew shall remain in force for a further 30 days. That there shall be no sale of alcoholic beverages or drinks in eateries and restaurants across the territory of the Republic of Kenya, effective midnight today for the next 30 days.
However, bars took advantage of the fact that restaurants were allowed to remain open and began selling food. President Uhuru Kenyatta stated that all bars will be closed indefinitely, adding that those who do not adhere will have their licenses permanently withdrawn. The head of state also directed the Inspector General of Police, Hilary Mutyambai, to withdraw permanently operating licenses of all bars that will breach the regulations put in place.
Contact tracing of the recent surge of infections indicates that our socializing without regard to protective behavior, particularly in an environment serving alcohol, is becoming one of the greatest risk factors in our country.
Kenya's restrictions have hit the poor hard, and it was a clamor to reopen the economy that pushed Kenyatta to lift the measures. Daniel Kariuki, African Focus.
Crossing borders now, residents and officials speak of attacks in northern Nigeria's Kaduna state by suspected Fulani militia, which destroyed homes, killed several people, and displaced more than 2,000.
Local government and communities said motorcycle riding gunmen in northern Nigeria have killed 11 people in the latest violence in the area. The attack came a day after assailants gunned down 18 wedding guests in a nearby village. The gunmen stormed Goragan village in Kaduna state after dark and opened fire on residents. The attackers also torched houses, a church, a car, and 7 motorcycles.
In this community, we've lost 12 people. It was just yesterday that we recovered a corpse just behind here that was buried. So far, in this community as it is now, as you can see for yourself, only the youth that can just protect the house. As far as the matter is concerned, children and women are no longer in this place. And all of us that you see here, most of us, since that Monday up to now, we have not eaten.
Southern Kaduna has been racked by a long-standing war between Muslim Fulani herders and ethnic Christian farmers over grazing and water rights. There has been an upsurge in tit-for-tat killings between the two groups in recent times, prompting the state authorities to initiate an unsuccessful truce. The violence was more complicated than many people are willing to admit. It added that revenge killings were worsening the conflict and making efforts of security personnel in ending the violence difficult.
We do not know where to go with this kind of situation. It's beyond our control now. Our appeal to government is to further look at this issue critically and see what they can do to alleviate the fears that exist. We are farmers, predominantly farmers in this place.
So we've not updated our record, but we have 2,416 persons now in the camp. And we have a number of others that are coming from the town, so we feed them.
It was not immediately clear who was behind the attack, but the area has been a hotbed of deadly violence between Muslim Fulani herders and ethnic Christian farmers. The mainly Christian southern Kaduna area has been racked by a long-standing dispute between farmers and herders over grazing and water rights.
Shifting gears now to politics. Tanzanian opposition heavyweight Tundu Lissu, who was shot 16 times in a 2017 attack, returned home from exile to challenge President John Magufuli in elections later this year. Lissu, a former MP with Chadema, main opposition party, was welcomed home by hundreds of supporters.
Tundu Lissu was greeted at the airport by party chairman Freeman Mbowe, who was walking on crutches after he was assaulted in June in what his party said was a politically motivated attack. Tanzania will hold a general election on October 28th, and the United States last month accused the country of seeking to stifle democratic norms ahead of the polls, with a string of arrests of opposition figures and the closure of a newspaper. Lissu said he was going back home to try and fight for the presidency.
We are thanking God for the coming back of our brother, of our comrade, maybe our next president, Tundu Lissu, today. That's why you can see all of us here waiting for the coming of this hero. We say he's a hero because he's the survivor. He's the survivor of 16 bullets, which was directly hit his body. Others, they say that it's the the living miracle. We are waiting for the living miracle to land. So we are very happy. That's why you can see lots of people around here waiting for him.
Lissu said his health was good after his ordeal, in which he was shot in his home in 2017, a year in which he was arrested at least 6 times.
Election coming next, we're expecting a lot of competition since he's one of the strongest opposition member. So yeah, I'm very happy that he's here and he's going to run for presidency.
Lissu told that Magufuli's handling of the coronavirus pandemic had been a national embarrassment and raised concerns about the holding of the election. Magufuli claims there are no more cases in the country, which last released official figures in April. The elderly in South Africa's old age homes have suffered months of loneliness as lockdown rules forbid friends and family from meeting.
Welcome back to Africa Focus. My name is Joel Chacha. Moving on, a summit in Mali to resolve the country's political crisis ended without progress this week. Also, Ethiopia celebrated its first-year target for filling a mega dam, and a handful of tourists were treated to watching thousands of wildebeest cross from Tanzania's Serengeti into the Masai Mara Nature Reserve. Take a look.
West African leaders ended a day-long summit in Mali on Thursday without a deal to soothe the country's escalating political crisis. 5 of the region's leaders met Mali President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, along with the leaders of a protest movement clamouring for his resignation, as a long-running jihadist insurgency threatens to throw the country into chaos.
It goes without saying that if we are in difficulty, that the Friends of Mali decide to get together to help us.
Following the talks, the leader of the main protest movement, Imam Mahmoud Dicko, expressed his disappointment at the lack of progress and unity between representatives.
Nothing has changed yet. We've been told nothing as far as I understand. I really wanted to say it very sincerely, and I said it and I will say it again. We are a people that stand. We are not a submissive or resigned people. I would rather die a martyr's death than a traitor's death.
Moi, je le dis, je préfère mourir martyr que de mourir traître.
Ethiopia says it has reached its first-year target for filling a mega dam on the Blue Nile River that has stoked tensions with downstream neighbours Egypt and Sudan. Egypt depends on the Nile for about 97% of its irrigation and drinking water, and says it has historic rights to the river guaranteed by treaties from 1929 and 1959. On Tuesday, leaders held their latest virtual summit to find a solution, but simply agreed to continue the talks. The dam is a source of national pride for Ethiopians, who were never included in agreements on the rights to the river.
The first filling has been completed, and you know how it has happened. It's due to the rainfall, heavy rainfall that we are blessed with this year, and the downpouring of the flood, which filled the dam actually, and this is a victory for Ethiopians, and Ethiopians are now in the festive mood, and they're celebrating the filling of the dam.
Sudan's former president Omar al-Bashir, ousted amid a popular pro-democracy uprising last year, went on trial Tuesday over the military coup that brought him to power more than 3 decades ago. The 76-year-old former leader could face the death penalty if convicted of the 1989 Islamist-backed overthrow of the democratically elected government of Prime Minister Sadiq el-Mahdi. However, the son of one of his co-accused said the trial is politically motivated.
The accusation is a malicious and political one from the beginning. The court is also political, and there are several pieces of evidence, the most important being the changing of many laws.
In South Africa, cemeteries and funeral services struggle under the influx of bodies as the coronavirus claims more and more victims. The government has closed schools once again after the number of known infections crossed the 400,000 threshold, the highest figure on the continent.
Normally, this time in June, we are having plus minus 16, 18 bodies in the fridge, up to 20. But currently, we are sitting with more than 30, At some point about a week ago, we were sitting at our full capacity, which is 44 bodies in the fridge. So it has really grown. In fact, it has doubled, to be honest.
We used to like a whole week of preparations and calling family members, you know. But now, wow, the things are made different. You can't even can't get close to the casket to view it going down. It's a mess, this thing, you know. It's just a huge mess.
And finally, thousands of wildebeest are crossing from Tanzania's Serengeti into the Masai Mara Nature Reserve in Kenya. The annual migration draws lots of attention and tourism, but this year isn't like any other.
For this time of the year, usually it could be like about 1,000 and more tourists, but because of the pandemic, it's hit the globe, it is quiet.
Last week, as Nairobi was opened, local tourists are coming, and from next week, hopefully, the international tourists will come, and then we will breathe again, because I think the Maasai community was suffering a bit from the lack of tourism and the lack of jobs.
Kenya's borders are still closed to international tourists amid the coronavirus pandemic, but local tourism is slowly picking up.
The elderly in South Africa's old age homes have suffered months of loneliness as lockdown rules forbid friends and family from meeting. Residents, family and staff speak of the experiences at the Casa Serena Italian old age home in the city of Jamison, east of Johannesburg, where the average age of tenants is 88 years.
Tassi is sitting in the lounge of the Casa Serena retirement home in the Johannesburg district of Germiston. The empty chairs tell their own tale of death and absence. At the start of the coronavirus pandemic, the facility, whose name means serene home, in Italian had 64 residents. Nearly a quarter of them have since died. Casa Serena is just one of 17 care facilities in Gauteng, South Africa's most populous province that have been ravaged by COVID-19.
In winter time, people die. You know, Metro will be able to explain better reasons or better causes, but people do die. So we were expecting people to die. The point is, this has been a concentration of death. They came to us with fear. Am I going to die? Am I positive? Am I negative? And you've got to answer. The point is you've got to choose an answer.
Across the nation, more than 400,000 cases have been recorded, the highest in Africa, with at least 6,000 deaths. Sarah, who lives at the center, also contracted coronavirus but recovered. He spoke bitterly about the unequal fight to save lives. As early as March, he imposed a rigid quarantine and other measures, but his defense were breached by a stealthy and relentless foe.
I knew that eventually I would be positive. I knew because I do all the things that should not be done. I hug them. I touch them. It comes natural.
We got a big shock when Mom was then diagnosed with COVID at 83. And we just look at how things progressed. I mean, we managed to replace her concentrator for oxygen because she's got COPD and she's dependent on her oxygen.
Most of the dedicated staff members have not left the facilities since nationwide coronavirus lockdown started on March 27th. But there is little they can do for residents stricken by fear, solitude, and a sense of powerlessness. The home, managed by an Italian community, includes the children of Italian World War II, prisoners and migrants who came to South Africa in the 1960s and 1970s to seek their fortune. Italian culture echoes through the home in the language and food and devotion to family. But visitors are only allowed under exceptional circumstances as the quarantine is still in force. Some residents have been waiting for more than 3 months for a chat with their loved ones.
I mean, this is the first time in about 90 days or whatever that I've been able to see my mom, and we've been trying to get in. So that was awesome, being able to have that opportunity to actually just see her.
Watching international news, especially from Italy, has not helped their mental well-being. They first witnessed the pandemic on television news earlier in the year when Italian nursing homes turned to coronavirus hotbeds and thousands of senior citizens succumbed to the virus. The rising incidence of COVID-19 infections renders testing at the home a futile practice.
Away from that, Somalia's parliament removed Prime Minister Hassan Ali Kaire from his post in a vote of no confidence for failing to pave the way towards fully democratic elections.
Somalia's parliament removed Prime Minister Hassan Ali from his post in a vote of no confidence for failing to pave the way towards fully democratic elections. A whopping 170 of Parliament's 178 MPs backed the no confidence motion, and Prime Minister Hassan Ali was immediately endorsed by President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo, who had appointed him as Prime Minister in February 2017.
Somali Parliament held a session of no vote of confidence against the Prime Minister Hassan Khaya, and PMs voted as follows. 170 parliamentarians endorsed the motion, 8 MPs rejected it, no one abstained.
The deputies had arrived at the National Assembly to work on the organization of the next national elections in 2021. The office of the president issued a statement indicating that Farmajo will nominate a new prime minister soon. The fragile central government, chaired by Farmajo, controls only a part of Somali territory and is facing an insurgency of the Al-Qaeda-affiliated Al-Shabaab militant group.
Therefore, as per our draft constitution, the president should nominate a new premier that can lead the country towards one man, one vote election.
Somalia has set itself the goal of holding a one-person, one-vote national election in early 2021, as opposed to a complex system in which special delegates pick lawmakers who then vote for the president in what will be its first full democratic election since 1969. Hassan Ali was a newcomer to the political scene when he became Prime Minister, having previously held the post of Director of the Africa Department of the British oil company Somag Oil and Gas. Ali is a member of the Hawiye clan, while Farmajo is from the Darod clan, in keeping with the traditional balance at the top of the Somali executive.
Elsewhere, Morocco's roads and transport hubs witnessed chaotic scenes after authorities announced snap movement restrictions affecting 8 cities and towns to curb the spread of the novel coronavirus.
Morocco's roads and transport hubs saw chaotic scenes after authorities announced snap movement restrictions affecting 8 cities and towns to curb the spread of the novel coronavirus. The measures shutting off all entry and exit to the cities, which together account for more than half of Morocco's population. The measures were announced just 5 hours before they came into effect at midnight. A joint statement from the Interior and Health Ministries said the new restrictions applied until further notice to economic capital Casablanca and tourist capital Marrakesh, as well as port city and second economic hub. There was mayhem as people converged on Casablanca's main bus station. The train station in nearby Mohammedia was still crowded on. Authorities announced the restrictions after a considerable rise in novel coronavirus cases just before the Muslim Eid al-Adha holiday, when families traditionally come together. The North African country registered record numbers of new daily infections over the weekend. The decision was made in view of the majority of citizens failing to comply with the preventive measures of social distancing and mask wearing. Earlier this month, authorities had announced an easing of some restrictions imposed in March, with steps to encourage domestic tourism and facilitate travel over the Eid al-Adha holiday.
And that's all we had on Africa Focus today, but keep the conversation going on our social media platforms at Switch TV Kenya, at Joel Chacha M on Twitter, and as well on Facebook, Switch TV Kenya. My name is Joel Chacha. Until next time, do have yourself a great time.